Good morning. I'm Tanis Morris, and with me, as usual, is my lovely co-host, Suzanne Hannafin of Acumen Executive Search. Hello.
Hello, Tanis.
Nice to see you today, and we are very excited to be joined on the podcast this morning by Paul Delvecchio, CEO at Ethos Companies. Paul brings a unique blend of engineering expertise, real estate strategy, and public sector insight to his work in development and investment across the Pacific Northwest. Paul's career spans leadership roles at firms like AECOM, Skanska USA, and the U.S. Department of State, where he worked on global real estate strategy, including land acquisitions for new embassies and consulates. He also has led major urban development projects in the private sector, managing several million square feet of multifamily, commercial, and hotel real estate. Paul holds advanced degrees in engineering management and international finance, is a licensed professional engineer, principal broker in Oregon and Washington, and an LEED accredited professional. He's also deeply involved in civic work, serving on boards that focus on housing, urban growth, and social impact. We're thrilled to have Paul with us today to share his insights on how smart hiring intersects with smart development. Paul, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you here for a number of different reasons. I've had the pleasure of having you kind of share your story with me in the past. We always kind of lead with having you tell your journey of how you kind of got to where you are now. And I'll add on to that question if you want to explain what it means to be the CEO of the Ethos Companies, in addition to kind of how you got there.
Sure. Yeah, I'll answer those questions backwards. Ethos Companies are three firms. Mm-hmm. They're intertwined by ownership and by values, and to a certain extent, the kind of market positioning. The first one was I founded and later took on a partner, Josh Bean, who's generally my business partner across all these things, is Ethos Development. It's 11 years old. And what it does is development and acquisition of buildings, market rate, generally for profit. But when we're building, we also typically have another goal in mind, be it affordable housing or energy efficiency or, pushing on some sort of unique code interpretation or something like that. So usually it has another goal. Ethos Commercial Advisors was formed about a year later. Josh runs the day-to-day of that one. I'm president of Ethos Development. Ethos Commercial Advisors is a brokerage firm that does several things, as most brokerage firms do. It agency leasing, which is leasing on account of an owner that owns a building. Tenant representation, which could be leasing a space or purchasing a space. It does debt and equity financing, which is somewhat unique for a smaller firm. So we do mortgage brokerage and can place equity on larger deals. And that service spans from a small $1 million loan up to, I think, probably in the mid-60s was our largest capitalization. And we have an office and investment sales. I think that's another service, selling a building that you own in investment property. We have an office in Portland. We have an office in Tacoma, Washington, and Dallas, Texas for that business. And then the last one is Meritus Property Group, which we acquired most of a few years ago. It was previously named Venerable Properties, and it was a well-known historic restoration redevelopment firm in Portland that was founded in 1991. As its partners, one of them unfortunately died, and the other one, as his career went on, wasn't interested in working as much, and it stopped developing and became a management platform. So that's primarily what we do with that business. So it manages about 1.2 million square feet of office, retail, and industrial, wow, mostly in the Portland MSA, and a bit over 3,000 housing units, and that's between Tacoma, Portland MSA, and we have an office in Branson, Missouri for that business. A client brought us there, and we're interested in the Midwest in generally, so we're looking to kind of move that presence north. So that's what that means, and I serve kind of a different purpose across each business line. About me, the first part of that question, I came into this through construction. And that's something that was in my family. My dad was a contractor and developer, and so was my mom's father. So it's something that I've been around. And my father wasn't actually super thrilled about me going in this direction. He really valued the idea of a degree and a license and having a more professional job. Not to say that being an entrepreneur isn't being a professional, but kind of a professional in the literal sense, or kind of classical sense, like a lawyer or an accountant or an engineer, someone that holds a license. And so I did that. I went to school for engineering, civil, and it's funny with real estate development. People say it all comes down to parking, which is often true. Like how much area you can build on a site or how much occupancy you can have or whatever, often comes down to cars, which is something, especially in a place like Portland, people don't like to admit, but it is very true. My whole career basically comes down to parking. I lived in a building in Washington, D.C. that it was a condo building, and I was renting from an owner, and I had a car, and it was hard to find a place for the car. So I asked the building manager, about the few spaces that were behind the building. And he said those were all leased by the construction company that was building the building next door. So, I didn't take that as a no. I just went there and asked, hey, I see that you guys are using these spaces, but not on the weekend. Is there a way that I could use these spaces on the weekends? And they said, no, they're for employees, and we can't really have somebody in here. And I said, well, can I have a job?
I love this story.
And I literally could get into their office by going into the stairwell. I lived on the third floor and just going down a few flights and popping out. And the guy looked at me. I happened to interface with someone that's kind of high level because he was the person that was there when I walked in. Yeah. So I'm an engineering student. I'm a junior. This isn't crazy. I am interested in this. And they said, sure. So I acquired a job, a parking spot, and ultimately a career.
Parking spot.
And that's that was kind of how that put me on a totally different arc than had I gotten a internship with an engineering firm. Yeah. So that was the beginning of my arc, and I kind of worked that with, and the company was big. It was Bovis Lend-Lease, which has been since renamed, but it's a global leader. We were working on a Ritz-Carlton hotel condominium project. One of similar has just gone up in Portland. Great experience. It's a downtown one in Washington, D.C., if anybody knows the area, not the Georgetown one.
Yeah.
And I went to George Washington, so it was near that school. I ended up getting a trustee's fellowship for a master's degree in engineering management at GW. And Bovis wanted to put me somewhere in the suburbs for the next job. Didn't work for going to school.
Yeah.
So I ended up going to work for a local contractor, Donahoe Construction, kind of family-owned firm. I don't know, I'd liken it to R&H or something like that here in the Portland market.
Yeah, okay.
Bigger because it's DC, but same basic idea.
Yeah.
So I worked, thinking there are building services divisions, small projects, interesting stuff. I actually worked on some foreign embassies.
Oh, wow.
On little things like the redo of a pond at the Japanese ambassador's residence. And
Oh my God.
Kind of fun little things. But I did my master's while I was there and very much appreciated the kind of family nature of that experience. When I was done with the master's, I went to work for AECOM in third-party construction management, not engineering, although it's an engineering firm.
Okay.
Had some cool experiences there. Most notably, I worked on a renovation of a hotel in Arlington, Virginia, which was adjacent to the Pentagon. And I actually saw the plane hit the Pentagon.
Oh my gosh.
The building was on Columbia Pike, and that is the route that the plane took. And I remember my boss and I were the only two people staffed. Everybody else on the job were contractors, and the hotel was operational. And at that moment, Christy Todd Whitman, who was the director of the EPA, was in our building for a conference.
Holy cow.
And so there were Secret Service people everywhere.
Yeah.
The painters we happened to be on the upper floors, and the painters were screaming that there was a plane. We went to look out the window and saw it. It was coming into the building, and actually had to turn, to get the wing out of the way of our building and then everybody runs across to the other side, and it hits the Pentagon.
Oh my God!
But actually, that turned out to be a big deal because when it turned back, the wing hit the ground.
Yeah,
Instead,
and it didn't hit it square on,
so it didn't hit the building first.
Yeah,
right.
Also, our company, AECOM, had just overseen a renovation of. There's 5 parts of the Pentagon, the Pent, right? So that it's not a quadrant, it's a quintrant. That, was just renovated, which included both some reinforcement of the facade, but importantly, there were very few people in it.
Oh my!
Right, because it hadn't been repopulated.
Wow.
So luckily, not that many people were hurt in that. In New York, it was much different. I lost a friend there, but it's wow. So anyway, so that was sort of a big deal in my career and life. I got recruited to work for a development company as a construction manager. So sort of same thing I was doing, just for a company rather than a contracted service. And that is really formative. The closest thing I had to a mentor were the 2 principals of that company, Michael Darby and Jeff Neal. One of whom kind of became a little bit famous because his second wife was on a Real Housewives.
Oh, okay.
So fun side to that.
Fact.
But a very gregarious guy. So I worked in construction management there, and then development management, and I ended up kind of running the residential development component of the company. It was it was boom times. It was the early 2000s in DC. I think it was the second most active condo market to Las Vegas in the country, and we were the most active condo developer. Just tons of stuff happening. There were lines out the door to buy condos. You could basically set the prices in advance and knew what was going to be. I mean, it was really unique times for developing things. But I learned a lot, and one of our main financiers was Lehman Brothers.
Yeah,
and I had a desire to get back to New York. I'm from Eastern Long Island, and Lehman's based in New York, and I got to know them well. And I kind of perceived that the industry was a ladder, and I was in development, but being in equity was higher on the ladder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think I know better now. I mean, it's a different job, and I don't know that I'm suited for that part of the industry, or best suited, I should say. But at the time, I mean, it seemed like a good idea. So I worked out an arrangement to go there, but they said you should go get a finance degree or an MBA or something prior because you're going to hit a ceiling kind of with a more engineering-oriented background. So I did. I went to Spain. I got a degree at Instituto de Empresa, which is a well-regarded business school in Europe. Mm-hmm. The reason for Europe was it's shorter, basically, right?
Yeah.
It's a little more than a year. The hours are the same, so it's a more compressed week. So you're going to school. You're in school more while you're there, and the summer is shorter. Had a great summer internship there. I worked with a nonprofit that promoted women's business participation in Africa.
Oh, wow.
And kind of I worked with some women to put together business plans to get funded. One of them did. It was very cool. So it was a great experience. I have great friends from that. It's not your typical experience in that I don't have a network that's particularly useful for business in the Pacific Northwest, but great friends.
Though.
I I was just in Switzerland 2 weeks ago and saw 2 friends, one of whom was my roommate. Good. It's good life experience. While I was in school, great financial crisis started. Lehman Brothers was no more.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do. So I finished the degree. I looked for jobs in Europe. They were paying, like half of what I was making pre-business school.
Yeah.
So I can't do this. Doesn't make sense. So I looked at going back to the U.S. and working in commercial real estate or development. There really wasn't such a thing. The market
during
was
that
so
time.
depressed. So that's how I ended up at the State Department. There was a woman who's now a great friend, Katie Troutman, who worked at the State Department, and she had previously worked for HFF, which is now rolled up into JLL. It was a brokerage firm. Their office was above ours, the Monument Realty office, so I knew her from that. But on Facebook, I just saw these pictures for years of her in all these weird places. what are you doing in Indonesia or Morocco?
Yeah.
So I when I got back to DC, which is where I went back when I finished up MBA, I got with her and said, what are you doing? What is this? I worked for the State Department, did leasing. I said, that sounds great. And we literally had a class in school about how to get a job.
Yeah.
And they said, go to the coffee shop near and look for people with the ID badges. So I did all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I ended up triangulating. I met 3 different people through contacts. And it sort of turned out that there is a way to get a government job that's, I wouldn't say easier, but more direct than just applying to a black hole.
For sure.
So I ended up getting this government job, which, was a non-managerial 14, which doesn't mean anything to most people, but it's very rare to not have to manage people, but have a level 14.
Yeah.
It only goes to 15, and then there's SES, which are political appointees. So it was a great job. I think for a lot of people, it was probably the final stop for a career. I found it super rewarding. I was traveling around buying sites for embassies and consulates. I worked in Saudi Arabia, Sri Lanka, Chad, Congo, Bahrain. Very cool stuff. I got some deals done. One was a 3-party deal between the country Sri Lanka, and we bought property from the British government. So it was, super complicated. We're talking about like title that goes back to the crown.
Jeez.
Like wild stuff. It was very cool. But there's, also like strange and annoying bureaucracy. Like I once was in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia, worked on a land deal, got something under contract. The government sort of authorizes us to pay appraised value, but it's not so much an authorization, but a mandate. Like they don't try to pay less, right? That's not how it works.
Right.
Yeah.
But I was like, I think we can pay less. So it took some work, but I got them to let me go there with 3 contracts, of various prices.
Yeah.
And just real time on the fly, meeting with the sellers,
pull this one out.
who are, it's like a royal family. There's a lot of royals there, but it was, a sect of royal family. And reading the room, I just pulled out the middle one. It was like, here's what we can do. And they took it. And, so I'd saved like, a couple $1,000,000.
Yeah.
And I get back and I'm getting beat up about a $20, cab ride. Because like the receipt wasn't right. And I'm like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
I got to spend an hour on this. There's so many funny stories from that. Like, it's a top secret building, the building was secret, right? So the files that were classified as secret could be there. So it's confidential and secret. And my clearance was higher, but the files couldn't be in that building. You got a safe at your desk. You could put stuff in it. I didn't have a key, so I got the desk, and there was just a safe, and I didn't know what was in there. And I don't know, I'm organized mindset. I want to know what's in there, and I want it to be clean. Maybe I want to use it. So I get the security people to open it, and they're like, "Okay, it's on you now." So I got to go through this. So I go through it, and I removed everything that was a color. So the green stuff is confidential, and the red stuff is secret. And so I thought I'd gotten all the classified files out. Gave them to the security people. So right now I'm clean, and I can get through the rest of the garbage later. They sweep the building with some regularity. They'll try to break into your computer. Like it's a,
Yes.
High stakes.
I don't know. It makes sense, right? So on a sweep, they go through my files and they found something that was confidential, and I got a citation for it. And there's a big thing in government called acting boss. There's this guy, Mike, was my acting boss because my actual boss wasn't there at the moment. He got on me about it. I took an earful from him, and then I finally got the paperwork, and it was. He had gotten a violation 10 years earlier, and it was his desk. And the classified document was appended to his violation because it was the document he had left on his desk overnight.
Oh, my God.
This is like classic stuff. So the amount of time spent on all this, like for this old document. It was like, that's
government
the stuff
not for me.
That's the stuff.
Okay.
I just couldn't. It was too much process, and I was too goal-oriented, so I ended up leaving. Great experience, and I went back to New York, worked on family business with my cousin for a year or so in the garment, apparel industry. Met my now wife, Lisa. We moved to the West Coast to be closer to her family, and sort of that's when the story with Ethos started.
Yeah.
So
probably one of the most interesting backstory. I'm like, wow.
And again, it's so common with a lot of our especially entrepreneurs, that nobody had a straight path. Your career has gone left, right. I mean, like, it is all over the place. And you kind of mentioned these formative experiences. What really, was it just you taking chances and taking opportunities, or was there some mentoring or guidance from others that helped you along this way?
I don't think that I had the mentality or risk tolerance or risk-seeking gene to be an entrepreneur. I think that I totally misread Portland. So when we came here, it was in 2014, there was a lot of development happening. Yeah. So that there are people doing what I do. There should be a job for me here. I was more in the mindset of, you can have a good career and make a lot of money working in development for a company.
Yeah.
You can become an equity shareholder and you can get a piece of the upside, and it's not a bad deal. And that's kind of how I thought I would be going. And it turned out that I was maybe a little too senior experience-wise and possibly too expensive for the smaller companies, like regional companies. And for the bigger interest that might have an office here or try to be doing projects here, I wasn't well networked enough to be their local managing director. So it was kind of a weird middle ground. Skanska took me on, and I worked for Skanska for a little under a year, but it was in construction estimating and sales, and I was kind of working with their Seattle development group, commercial development group, but the kind of Seattle-Portland thing wasn't working that well internally, and they ultimately said, like, hey, you can just move up here. We'd be happy to have you. And that wasn't right for us because we'd settled now in Portland. And so it was almost like it was the option. If I wanted to be doing this kind of work, I found a site near my house in Northeast. I lived in kind of Hollywood Grant Park, and I found a site on Fremont, 46 in Fremont, and did it. And it was the smallest building I'd ever worked on. I'd never worked on anything that was made out of wood. I'd never raised money before. I'd never signed a loan guarantee before. That's a kind of huge limiting factor for people that are looking to develop or sponsor, is what is your balance sheet and can it support the loan? I had to get the contractor signed on it as well. So, that there were some big leaps in there. So it wasn't about the technical process of underwriting what should go there, determining what kind of building it's going to be, what are the finishes, how do you lease it up? Like, that was sort of ordinary for me. It was the business component of it. Where does the money come from? What's the capital structure? When's it going to be sold? How are you splitting profits? I mean, there's a lot that goes into the deal side of things that I'd been exposed to, but it wasn't my job previously. So interestingly, though, that's the success of getting that going wasn't enough for me to get the memo. I still pursued jobs.
Oh, wow.
So I was talking to a local industrial ownership, development and ownership platform, really, well-regarded, great people. And they wanted me to kind of run construction for them, the group. And I was all for it. I thought it was a great idea. Yeah. And ultimately, they're like, well, what are you doing now? I was like, well, I'm doing this. And actually, we can't hire you with this, right? Like that's the choice you made.
Yeah.
So, it was the divided interests were too much. And so that sort of put me on a path to just do more of it.
So now at that point, okay, so now you have your own, organization. I'm so curious to hear, or, how have all of these experiences, working for government, working for big development, being entrepreneurial by default or by through intention, whatever it is, what are your closely held values, and how do you operationalize them as a leader, as a leader for the people on your team, as a leader for, the people investing with you or working with you?
Yeah, it's interesting. So you qualified that moment as us having an organization, or me. It wasn't. It was a deal. And I think that's what's interesting about not so much the property management business, but that came later, but brokerage and development. It's, I don't want to say easy, but most people that are good at it are good at doing deals. So you can put together a deal and execute the deal. And there are a lot of folks that just do that, right? They can work out of their house. And brokerage, teams don't have to really operate the business per se because the firm does that. They're just worried about their deals. taking that and operationalizing it and making a business out of it is another step.
Totally.
Right.
And it takes a level of sort of organization and planning that I think I was pretty well suited for.
Yeah.
I think that's actually, that transition is what I think was somewhat unique about us. Because there are a lot of folks that do some deals and they do a good job.
So I'm going to dial it back for just a second because that is so interesting. My family is in commercial development, commercial real estate development. And I am interested, like when you said that, it kind of triggered something in me because I was thinking, you're like, we didn't necessarily have an organization yet. We're making a deal. Even in a deal, you're a leader.
Yes, you are.
So like it's a different, you might not be leading a team, but you're leading an operation
sure.
and you're leading other people. It's both more complex and then maybe more simple.
Sure, yeah. Each development project, and that first one I think was maybe a $12 or $13 million project. Our largest one now, maybe in the mid 70s or something like that. So if you think about that, like you are, for each of these projects, you are creating a business plan, you're capitalizing it, you're executing, and maybe there's a period where you're operating, right? So you're building or buying and making changes, improvements, and operating and then disposing.
Yeah.
So it's not different from an operating business. I think that the difference is that things really only happen once.
Yeah.
It's not that you're creating the widget over and over. You just created one widget.
Totally.
But I think validating what you're saying, that yes, there is a component to running a business within that. And what I like, what all of our business is about, all three of them, is taking institutional sophistication and making it available to the mid-market. That's one of the values that we carry through the businesses, and that was front of mind for me at the beginning because my background was working on big projects in a big market with big equity. So we worked with Apollo and Carlyle, Lehman, household name private equity firms, and I learned from the guys that own my company and their partners how to do this. So my how to do this wasn't, we built and still do small, big deals, not big, small deals. And the differences show up in fit and finish. They might show up in reporting. They might show up in how you capitalize. They might show up in how you make your deal with capital. Kind of the financial structure. So I think so that's something that we carry through. And some of our other folks, there's a partner at our brokerage firm that came from HFF, the same firm that my friend from the State Department was at. So same idea. We're bringing kind of this higher level, higher order thinking. It's hard for regional and local firms to get actual institutional business because you're competing with national relationships and things like that on the brokerage side. It's possible on the sponsorship side. Like we also work with Carlyle now, but it's in principle and others, right? I mean, so we're kind of getting there on the sponsorship side, but that was the idea.
Yeah.
And beyond that, I mean, it's things that I'd like to think are obvious, but I've learned are not, which is integrity, clarity of intentions. There's things that we've had disputes with various contractors and partners along the way here, which is unfortunately more normal than not. And you learn that not everyone is seeing the world that way. So I think some of the basics plus there was a concept to kind of how this was formulated.
Yeah.
And so when you take this idea of really kind of upscaling and up mid-market with again larger institutions and backgrounds and ideas and thoughts, how do you then translate that into hiring internally?
Hiring people for our business?
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I mean, I think that you can go down a bunch of roads with that. Part of it is credentials. We've for the development team, there's not a big team, but the people that work there are very qualified and have, great pedigree. They're not, we have done some step-up type hires. They haven't worked out as well as I'd like. So you're just not cutting corners, I think is part of it. And for that team, we have never advertised. It's always relationship based and slow. So, we'll talk to somebody for 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah. But it's interesting because like what you're mentioning is, kind of hiring based on credentials, but then you're saying it's a 6-month cycle. So like, I would imagine you're spending time getting to understand if their values align or if they're going to be a good fit.
Yeah.
So, which would you weight more heavily?
Well, I think it's sequential. You're not digging into the relationship part if there wasn't.
Right.
Right.
So,
Okay. Okay.
Right. So
it's a qualifier is the credentials and the pedigree.
and then
you
you're
get
spending
into
some
the,
time.
yeah. Okay.
And it's people that, we know from other relationships. They work somewhere else that we're familiar with, or we have worked with them in some way. The development team is very small. Development teams tend to be small because most of really what you're leveraging is capital. And we work with, we have a syndication group. So people might, friends and family, kind of country club type money. I think we probably have, 300 individual investors or something. But we also work with institutional equity partners, so funds, which is somewhat unique. I mean, generally there's a fork in the road for that. And we do both depending on the project size and type, and sometimes mix them. So there's uniqueness in that. But that's really what you're scaling. We outsource most of our construction management work. So that's, we can scale up relatively easy. And the cost of that is borne by the project. So you can keep it small.
Yeah, small.
There's 120 people across the organization in total. And at development, there's 3.
Okay.
Right, just for scale, right?
Yeah, no, that's
that makes sense.
So, it's brokerage. I think it's about 15 or so, maybe 17 in that space between the offices and the rest are all in property management.
That makes sense.
So I think that learning in what you're asking about, Suzanne, for us has been on the property management side where it is much more hiring intensive.
Yeah.
Oh,
You're constantly hiring, and we've kind of reverted to a similar style where it does root. There's some connection to people, and we're hiring people from well-known, well-regarded platforms. We have tried kind of the step-up thing, and it didn't go as well as we'd have liked. So I think that's the sort of thing that maybe we'll do internally, less externally. So it's if you had somebody that's high potential and they came in as X role and you want them to be Y role, you help build that inside rather than hiring for the jump.
Well, it's so interesting because you've done so many things. I'm really curious to ask you our next question, which is what advice would you give to your younger self?
Honestly, now knowing where I ended up, I regret not just doing it earlier.
Oh, but you had all these amazing experiences.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, I actually remember I was about 35 in a bar with somebody, and I said if I died now, I'd be happy. And people, they were really challenging me on it. I said, well, I've lived 3 or 4 lives.
Yeah.
I've done all this stuff. I wasn't married at the time and didn't have any kids. So kind of that category of why to live didn't exist. But so sure. Yeah. I mean, if I had done this earlier, then I wouldn't have had some of the experiences that maybe make me better at what I do. So sure. Yeah. I mean, that's, it's a reasonable light pushback on that point, but it takes time to mature a business. And now I'm looking at my age. I'm 47. I don't want to work forever. So how much can I do in the next 10 years? And I wish there were 20, right? But there isn't.
Oh, there is.
Yeah. If you
Calm down.
If you love what you do. But that's funny because I was going to ask you this earlier. You mentioned the Midwest interest. What is your 10-year pie in the sky goal?
Yeah. So when we think about strategy, there's really 2 separate strategies. The brokerage firm, while it works with kind of development and property management, their strategies aren't intrinsically linked.
Right.
And we're really focusing on the Texas market with that business. I mean, I hate to say it, we are sitting in Portland. We're in a beautiful space. There's not a lot of near-term future for people that do what we do here. When you think about brokerage, I mean, to the extent that things are even leasing or selling, they are leasing or selling for much less than they used to be. It's not great. It's not a great moment for brokers. And, we're seeing what's possible in other markets because we are there, and that looks good. So there's some eyes on other places. I mean, we are also here. It's not going to go away, but we need to fan out a little bit. For operations, kind of the property management company and the development company, those two really run together. And we're in Missouri. We're thinking about how do we leverage that? Do we want to be owners in that market? I'm not sure, but there are other nearby markets that are interesting. And I think for us, there's a few Texas cities that are interesting. We like kind of Fayetteville. Part of that's personal. There's Bentonville is nearby, and it's a big mountain bike center, which is interesting to me. It's one of the things I like to do. But it's also it's got a lot of growth. It's there's university there. It's backed by the Waltons. I mean, there's a lot to be said about that region. Kind of politically, then leads to the legislative environment leads to it's a better place to operate.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. There's other parts of the Midwest that are interesting. Minneapolis is interesting, and there are other markets. We haven't kind of concluded kind of a market study exercise that we're doing, but ultimately we're going to pick another place and spend some time there and start to build out ownership platform there. Property management really just needs X units to be worthwhile to operate in, get licensed and do it. And I mean, like Phoenix is an example of a place we'd love to be managers, but I'm really not interested in owning. So that there may be a fork in the road on management goes here, but ownership doesn't. But in general, as a growth trajectory, we're trying to hit, I would like Meritus Property Group to be kind of a top 50 U.S. firm inside of 10 years.
Okay.
Which is about a 10x in residential units under management or so. And I think it's possible. I think we have a great team to do it. We've hired people that I think are far more qualified than the current firm size would imply is necessary, and that it's for that. So getting everybody, getting the systems right, getting the incentives right, and getting the team, focused on the growth, is I think probably a 2026 thing, and so that's where I'd like that to go, and then the ownership platform becomes some part of that, right? So it's, what is it, 10% or it's X% of that growth is our internal growth.
That makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. So we always end this conversation with the same question because this is a podcast called Hiring for Good. So when you look at again this 10-year mark and all this and hiring and scaling, what does hiring for good mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, there's, the obvious wordplay there, right? It's like, is it hiring for permanence or is it hiring for prosperity or is it hiring for
That was very
benefit?
intentional.
Yeah, clearly, that was, we've been spending a lot of time with our 5-year-old on that. He caught on to the idea recently that words can mean multiple things. So he keps pointing them out. And he'll come running out of his room saying, I got one, duty's a funny one. So, it's for him, for hiring for good, it's I would like to think permanence, but it's just not true. It never is, right? Like you don't know what part of someone's arc you're going to be part of, right? And as long as their growth tragectory, is meaningful at the time when they're with you, that's okay, right? Like nothing. I don't think anything is permanent. We're all transitioning from something to something, and if somebody ends up running their career out with us, and that is rewarding for them, and it worked for us, that's great. Yeah. But I don't think that that's an assumption or a prerequisite. I mean, in some ways, that may actually limit you quite a bit in who you're getting. So, I think I will interpret it mostly as kind of a cultural fit, right? It's a good fit in that what this person wants to do overlaps with what the company's charter is for that period of time, and ultimately, I mean, our business, in at least the majority of it on the management side, and the part that I participate most in is housing. That as an endeavor, it's kind of one of our basic needs.
Yeah.
It's right there for Maslow, right? I don't know what food.
I think it's number 2.
Yeah. So it's an important
Shelter.
thing, right?
It might be even number 1. Yeah.
So it's there's all kinds of health outcomes tied to housing and all this stuff. So there's it's important, and we want to do it well, and we want people to be happy in their homes and thrive. And in order to do that, the buildings need to be good, and the management needs to be good. So I think that the and there's culture that underpins that. So why and how are we doing this stuff? So getting people that tie into the why and the how for the period that they're there, I think is how I'd interpret the hiring for good.
We're ending with a trifecta meaning. Thank you. That's wonderful. Honestly, I value your answer. I just think it's funny. You kind of took us on a journey from, well, maybe not permanence, but, good fit, good purpose, and then for permanence for while they're there, So it's kind of like maybe one of the best answers that we've had for really encompassing everything that we intended that the title of the podcast could be. So thank you. That's like a perfect summation. Yeah.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. And this was really good. Thank you.
I really appreciate you being here. I knew when we first had the chance to meet, I really value the way that your brain works, and I was excited to have the chance to share it with our audience. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's great to see you both.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today at Hiring for Good. If you were inspired by our conversation, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you want to learn more about our executive search services, check us out at www.hiringforgood.net or our company website, Acumen Executive Search.
Thanks so much, and don't forget to join us next time for another in-depth conversation about transformational leadership. Until then, have fun.